Happy Saturday, folks. It's the real Captain Kirk here. It's the 9th of September here, 2023. Hard to believe here. Live from One Bethlehem Plaza here in downtown Bethlehem. Only about 107 days until Christmas if you're counting. Before we get to Christmas here, I thought we'd talk fall here. Fall foliage, starting to see some color across the states here in the northern tier in the Rockies. This map here is just showing you when, historically. So start September, we see it in the Rockies. We see some fall leaf color in the upper Midwest, New England, higher elevations. And then it spreads south as we go through the fall into early December timeframe. Just look at some of these dry areas. Dry areas will typically across the south central U.S., north central U.S., and parts of the northwest, maybe even there a little pocket near D.C., Virginia area. Those areas, again, tend to go in stages, so the leaves will come down quicker, they're weaker, the tree's not as healthy, versus some of these wet areas here that you see in the northern Rocky Mountains and northern New England, where it's been very wet. Those trees will be healthier, hang on to the leaves a little longer. Color may be a little duller if it's been too wet. Typically the drier years, drought means the leaves can drop quick, but if it's just dry-ish, then you can actually have a beautiful fall. So we'll see. New England may not be that great, and we're going to be talking hurricane for New England here as well. So not potentially a great season here in New England for color. Summer is officially in the history book, at least in terms of meteorological summer, which was 1 June through 31 August. And while there was a lot of hype here about the hot summer and heat waves, really wasn't as bad as the media might have suggested here. So it's about 0.8 degrees cooler than last year, coolest in 4 years for the U.S. overall. Still 10th warmest of the past 38 years, so above average. 5% wetter than a year ago, about 1% below average, 17th driest in 38 years, so in the middle of the pack, about average. Precip versus average left, temperatures versus average right. Big map here is the trends versus last year on a retail calendar. So again, compared to last year, not as bad across the U.S. and Europe. Again, we can look at another way to look at this is 90-degree days. This is the sum of 90-degree days across 260 major cities across the U.S. And while above average, it was still 14% less than last year, least in 4 years. Again, 17% above average, but 7th most in 38 years. So again, not the scorching heat that we had last year, near record heat, back #1 hottest in 125 plus years. Tornadoes again are up, continuing their trend here. So we're about 1,301 tornadoes, 23% more than last year, 12% above average, most in 4 years. No matter how you slice it here, it's been an active tornado season. Good news on the drought front, drought is actually down. Again, we're right at average actually. So 51% of the country currently is in dry to drought phases, those yellows and oranges and reds on the left map versus last year when we had 64% of the country. So much improvement, obviously, there in California with their winter snowfall they had. Still some expanding drought there in the south central Texas area. They may actually get some relief here, but again, not too bad for the nation as a whole. Looking at last week here, week ending 9 September here in the U.S., it was a hot one for sure. 2.2 warmer than last year, #1 hottest in 38 years, so near record heat, much above average U.S. temperatures. Don't tell folks that in California, it was actually pretty cool. 57% drier on the national scale, driest in 18 years, second driest in 38 years. If we just look at these trends across the world, everybody's hot. Typical emerging strong El Nino. You kind of expect that some fall with an El Nino emerging this time of year. #1 hottest in the U.S., warmest in 12 years in Canada, #1 warmest in the U.K., #1 warmest in Europe, warmest in 24 years in China. So again, net, again, emerging El Nino, you're going to have some heat. What's very odd, though, is actually there's been no atmospheric response, at least in the Atlantic, just yet, because we're still having a very active season here. So again, normally in El Nino, you get some shear and wouldn't have this kind of season, but we are. Major Hurricane Lee is a maybe near miss. For sure from Cape Cod to Maine, Nova Scotia, probably they've taken the direct hit next weekend. Looks like about a Saturday time frame for landfall. Almost certain that it will make landfall, and most likely in there in southeast Canada. But certainly from Cape Cod to Maine, you will definitely potentially see some tropical storm type winds from Lee. The unfortunate thing is that there's 80-degree water temperatures all the way up to about 40 degrees latitude, even north of that. So it'll maintain its strength. Again, it was once a Cat 5, probably going to be a Cat 2, maybe a very strong Cat 1 at the minimal landfall in Nova Scotia here by the weekend. So it's a powerful storm for sure, and as it goes north, it will expand. So the center is very narrow right now and compact, but as they move north like this, the wind field, just like Sandy, tend to kind of explode outwards. So you get not as intense winds, but more broad, strong tropical storm, minimal category 1 hurricane winds. So something to watch for sure in New England. You can see these animations here. So currently Cat 3, it did go from 5 to 3, expected to go back up to 3-4 as it makes a right turn here. Good news is it looks like it's going to split the gap here, miss Bermuda, west of Bermuda, and hopefully stay off the East Coast and only some glancing blow there again for Cape Cod and Maine, but something to watch for sure. One thing we won't miss is the entire East Coast looks to have very large swells of 7 to 12 foot plus waves, rip currents, pretty much up and down the entire East Coast. And right off of Cape Cod, with the storm coming next weekend, could be looking at again 10, 15, 20 foot waves. As you go to Nova Scotia, probably looking at 30 foot waves. Unfortunately, this Maine area has already had the wettest past 30, 60 days or so in 10 years. Nova Scotia, the second wettest in 38 years. So very wet, saturated ground up there. So as Lee comes on land, again, not a lot of room for all that water that will be coming with Lee. If we look at this week again, week ending 16 September here, about 0.6 cooler than last year, coolest in 3 years, 16th warmest in 38 years, still above average. So this is some good news. Again, after some really hot weather, it's a little bit cooler, but some uptick in seasonal sales here for the central U.S., Ohio Valley. Still a bit drier, 9% drier than last year, driest in 8 years. Very wet there again. This may be underdone for sure. Certainly probably going to see more than several inches of rain from Cape Cod to Maine. And again, they just can't handle it with the saturated ground. Good news, let's hope that Texas rainfall, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Denver, Colorado area, that area gets the rain. They desperately need it. But those will be the two soggy spots here this week. Next week, farmers are already starting to get out there doing their harvest. Again, hard to believe here, mid to late September. Another flip-flop in the pattern, though, here, again, going back to hot. So 0.8 warmer than last year, warmest in 6 years, fourth warmest in 38 years, so much above average temperatures nationally, and dry. We'll see if it's the number one driest in 38 years. But again, warm, dry pattern is good for farmers getting out there harvesting. It's horrible for retail seasonal sales. You're not thinking about a hoodie or sweaters or gloves or any of that kind of thing right now that are on the retail shelves just yet. So very slow start compared to last year. We can look at that September, October time frame. Last year, we were the coolest in 10 years. Very cold start, actually. It was even coolest in decades, 2 decades down in the south. Last year, southeast, were at a rampant flu season because of the cold weather. Kids trapped indoors, heat on. That's typically where the flu starts. So very, very fast start because of the cold weather last year. Not the case this year. So some good news, at least on the flu front. Flu virus will be delayed here. Probably instead of a late November peak, we're going to think about flu in the typical late January, February time frame. So that's good news, but bad news for seasonal sales here. Tons of excess inventory going into the November time frame, and again, not good news for retailers, seasonal suppliers, and the overall economy. Again, this is what keeps the economy going, is folks buying things that retailers are trying to sell. So again, a soft start for sure. We just aggregate these two work yellow trends here. Again, we see again going from a cool to a warm pattern, warm to cool to warm in the U.S. So again, overall, the general theme is warm. Europe, wall-to-wall warm. So again, pretty much typical El Nino fall, and that is just a warm conditions. So with that, folks, we hope you have a great week ahead, weekend, and again, we'll keep you updated here on social media with Hurricane Lee. Have a great week.